Today, we react to the first week of the preseason, everything you need to care about for your Dynasty leagues, as well as any injuries and other stuff going on from training camp. Stick around for all that and more. Welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. It's just David and I today. Justin here. JP still on vacation, coming back with us next week. So we will be bringing you, like we said in the intro, some very important reactions and news. We had a full week of preseason football. It's not quite real football. Some moments were pretty exciting. Vikings seem to be taking it pretty seriously. Even if you didn't watch any full games, it's still fun to watch some of these highlights, to see these rookies in their first action. And when looking at stats or watching highlights, just remember the context matters. The snap counts that players have with the ones, the snap counts they have with the starting QB, especially. If there's big plays in the second half, they're fun, but we really need to take those with a grain of salt. Those players are not NFL starters they're playing against. So really just remembering some of that context. David, go ahead and start us off with our first segment here.
Fortunately, we're going to start with some of the negative. Injuries are probably the most important and fantasy relevant part of the preseason. We never like to hear about them, but we got to keep track. I think I only am aware of 2 that were actually from preseason. We'll get into some more that happened in practice later on. But as far as the games are concerned, the first one we want to talk about is Hollywood Brown. He left the Chiefs preseason opener with a shoulder injury after one play. We did have an 11-yard catch on that one play, so I think 100% target on routes run, which is pretty good if he can keep that up. Diagnosis, at least the early diagnosis, seems to be similar to an injury that cost Tyreek Hill about 4 games a couple years ago. Fortunately, we have a little time before the season, but if diagnosis seems to be confirmed, it's possible he misses a week or 2 to start the season. Don't love that, but it doesn't seem to be super long term, so still not panicking with him.
I am a little bit interested in throwing out some feeler offers for Worthy. I wouldn't pay any more than I probably would have been willing to pay before, but maybe just I'm more interested in upping my exposure a little bit. So a first and a third type of valuation I might be willing to pay for Worthy in the right situation, but I was always a little bit more for Worthy than everybody else. So I know not everyone might be looking to buy into this news, something I'm interested in at least inquiring about. Other injury news, Marshawn Lloyd left the Packers game with a hamstring injury. JP shared that information on X a couple weeks ago, right? This is the injury with the highest re-injury rate. He's already missed some time during training camp due to injury. There's been reports about ball handling issues when he's been able to practice. Maybe the role for RB2 is a little bit more open. Maybe AJ Dillon, even though he's not going to be special, but he's going to be consistent. I mean, they've had him there. He knows the offense. Possibly there's a little bit more to it than Marshawn Lloyd is going to be the RB2, the handcuff we absolutely want, but time will tell on that one. Never like to see rookies missing time, though.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part there is he's missing some very valuable time to learn the offense. And as you mentioned, AJ Dillon knows it. He's very beloved in that locker room and the state in general, to be honest. We also have Emmanuel Wilson, who's been looking pretty good. It's something to monitor, but, I'm not going to sell low on Lloyd. Yeah, I still like the talent. They invested a 3rd-round pick in him. They still have plans for him long term. Just maybe a little setback to start the career there. Moving on from those 2 injuries, we do want to mention a few things that happened in game that were positive. Well, most of it positive, some of it, I guess, negative. But just a reminder, this is one preseason game. It's the first one of that, so please don't overreact in either direction. This is definitely part of the puzzle, but it's a very small piece. So first bit of news I want to get into, Jalen Wright, currently listed as 5th on the Dolphins depth chart at running back. Did not see a snap with the starters this week. Little bit concerning, but we look back to last year and Chain was also listed as 5th on the depth chart to start the preseason. I'm not reading too much into it. Definitely looking forward to seeing how that grows as we progress through the preseason. Yeah, nothing really to write about from him other than that.
And on top of that, I don't think anybody really expects him to run with the starters as long as Achane and Mostert are both healthy. I think he is a incredibly high upside handcuff because we know there can be 2 fantasy relevant running backs in this room. So if either of those guys go down or Mostert just ages out, I think that's when Wright's value kind of comes in. So I'm not concerned whatsoever about this. He's still what he is, which is a potential, league winner if injuries hit just the wrong way, and he's as good as we think he is. Another backfield that we're looking at, the battle between Kenneth Gainwell, Will Shipley for the Eagles RB2. I think people kind of just penciled in Shipley as the RB2. Like, that's the general sentiment that we got from a lot of people after the draft, right? People writing off Gainwell again. But Shipley didn't come into the game until after Gainwell's night was done. However, Gainwell has already beaten his preseason snap count from last year. That does also lead us to think that it is a battle. Like, if they want him in the game and they're trying to see what he's doing, they knew this guy is without a doubt the two, there's no questions, he probably would hit the bench a little bit sooner. And on top of that, Shipley had a receiving touchdown in the game. So this is definitely one to monitor. Probably snap counts, who's running with the ones, maybe more so than just production is really what's going to tell the story there for us.
Yeah, they just seem to love Kenny Gainwell there, don't they? Every year we think he's done, and then every year he has a bigger role than expected. I kind of think he'll be the RB2 to start the season. I think Shipley might, eat into that and take it over eventually. This one's kind of important because Saquon is not generally the healthiest running back out there, and running backs aren't healthy in general. The guy behind him could definitely see a couple of spike weeks, so something to monitor.
Absolutely.
Next piece of news. Glad I get to read this one of my favorites. The Dontavian Wicks hype train continues to gain steam. We love it. Caught a 65-yard touchdown from Jordan Love in the starter's only drive. Love attempted 2 passes. First one was a loss of 1 to Josh Jacobs. Second one was a 65-yard touchdown. Then the first team offense at least was done. We like to see this from Wicks. There was some negative coming about him after Packers family night practice. For those that don't know, that is a practice that takes place in Lambeau Field, and they sell, I don't know, I think like 80,000 tickets or something crazy. It might not be that high, but they sell a lot of tickets for a practice, so that it's pretty serious, and you can kind of read into who's playing with who. Wicks did not play with the starters much at family night, so seeing him come in with the starters there and have a big play, something we like to see for those of us on the hype train.
Personally, I have the same opinion I've had on this one, which is I have no idea what's going to happen. We've seen the Dubs hype train, we've seen the Wicks hype train taken off, and all of this while the probable 1 and 2 haven't even been mentioned yet in Watson and Reed. So it's definitely one to monitor, but there's a lot of mouths to feed has been my attitude the whole time. Moving from one situation with a lot of mouths to feed to one where only one mouth got fed. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell connected for a touchdown, while Collins and Digg played but went without a single target. Ooh, that's got to be, I mean, in preseason didn't get targeted. So that means Dell has more touchdowns than Collins and Diggs have combined targets. I'm not worried. Of course, we're joking. We're not reading into this at all. It's the preseason. It is worth noting that it was Collins and Diggs for the two players when they ran a 2 wide receiver set. So that probably means that Dell is going to be on the bench playing out of the slot. That's probably the most interesting thing to read into just from a snap share percentage. But when you have these 3 wide receivers, I think we both feel pretty confident that they're going to be running a lot of 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, and it was just 2 snaps, so we don't know for sure that it's going to always be those 2. Like we said, small sample size in one game. But for those of us who have been high on Tank Dell, we would have liked to see him out there in the 2 wide receiver sets. Hope to see him in some going forward. Also love the connection, though, between him and Stroud. It is definitely real, and they are on the same page often. So as long as they live in 3 wide sets like we expect, it doesn't matter too much to me who the 2 wide receivers are in the 2 wide sets. Just a small boost if he can get those snaps. Next thing, Jahan Dotson, a name that used to have a lot of hype around it, now is kind of the opposite direction. Well, it looks like they're moving his role to the slot. Lined up in the slot 28% of the time his rookie year, 39% last year, but it looks like maybe that'll be his role going forward. New offensive coordinator there, Cliff Kingsbury. He did target the slot at the second highest rate while he was the head coach in Arizona. So maybe this is a good thing for Dotson. I'm not going to tell you to go buy him, but if you have him sitting there rotting away on the bench, maybe there's a little bit of hope. Something you like to hear if you are still a manager with Dotson on your team.
Yeah, I was hoping, like, along that slot hype statistics you're giving there about how Kingsbury likes to use the slot. I mean, that's feeding a little bit into my hopes and dreams for one Luke McCaffrey, my one true love, the prince that was promised, etc. et al. A little bit worrisome for me and my Luke McCaffrey hype train here. Could just be he's a rookie and they don't have him running with the ones just yet, and he can still work his way into that role. I hope so. But if Dotson does end up with that slot role in the kind of horizontal offense that Kingsbury's kind of historically ran, definitely something to take notice on. I might be seeing if I can get him in any of my remaining underdog drafts if we're not quite there yet. Not going to reach on him, but if I can get him at a decent value, something that I'm interested in more than I was a week ago. So definitely to keep an eye on. Next thing that probably just means we are out on this situation is seeing Gerald Everett started over Cole Kmet this week. Both players got snaps. I don't really care because unless Cole Kmet gets 100% of the snaps as the tight end, I don't really see much of a path to any relevance. And to be honest with you, even if he did get 100% of the snaps at tight end, the best case scenario is probably very boom bust touchdown dependent, right? Because of the fact that we have three great wide receivers. Talk about a crowded room like we're talking about with the Texans when you have Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, and of course DJ Moore all here. I mean, come on, like now he has to fight with Gerald Everett on top of that. I think I'm gonna see if I can move my one remaining share of Cole Kmet. It is best ball that I have him in, but even so, I'm probably gonna send out some offers, see if I can get just a small tier down name wise and tight end in a third or something back. I'd be happy at that point.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked about Komet's likely reduced role a couple times this offseason. And when we talked about it then, it was in the context of him likely starting over Everett. So if it's a split or if Everett actually is starting, get out while you can. I agree with that for sure. More tight end news, more fun tight end news actually this time. It's like the Raiders are giving us an early look into the way they plan to use Brock Bowers. Not a big surprise here, as they've talked a lot about moving him around the formation. He lined up tight, he lined up out wide, he lined up in the slot, lined up in the backfield. Just a couple quarterback snaps away from being Taysom Hill, if you ask me. Definitely interesting, though. Something we like to see as Bowers managers. But a little bit more surprising, I found. Michael Mayer was actually a big part of the offense in this game. He played one more snap and ran one more route than Bowers. Now he didn't move around as much, and the big playability and probably the design targets are all going to go to Bowers. But the fact that Mayer's been out there, maybe he's got a little more value than we all thought after the Bowers draft pick.
Yeah, hard to see a route where both of them are relevant. Definitely a lot more interested in Bowers than Mayer, but Mayer in a best ball format, I'm more interested in him than I was before for sure. Moving on to another battle we're looking at that we've talked about already this offseason, the Bengals RB room. So we saw Zach Moss out with an illness, so we didn't really learn anything about it. Brown's usage was somewhat notable though, as he wasn't replaced for receiving back on passing downs like the Bengals typically do. Hard to read into that without Moss there, whether or not we'd see this back and forth and back and forth. The fact that they didn't, it could also just mean they're trying to see, can he do it in this sort of live situation, right? Can he be that passing down back? Teams have scrimmages, but trying it in the preseason as well. I mean, it's the lowest risk time to try it. So I think when Moss is back, if we still see that, then we really start reading into that as news. But something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely something to monitor. I think it was interesting that they didn't replace him for, receiving down back, thinking all the way back to even Gio Bernard ever since then, maybe before. They've really liked to do that, kind of split the roles between their backfield. If Brown can be the receiving down back, he'll also get some early down work. And Moss is just an early down goal line kind of guy, kind of how I expect it to go. And I think they'll both be useful at that point. But hey, if one of these guys takes the job by the horns, that's league winning upside, in my opinion, for both of them.
Sure is.
Another Bengal we want to talk about, Jermaine Burton, rookie that's gotten a lot of hype. Fortunately, he didn't enter the game until the starters were done and 6 other receivers had taken a snap. And that group of 6 does not include Jamar Chase, as he was not playing in this game. With that being said, Burton did look pretty good once he got out there with 3 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Kind of mixed bag there in week 1. A lot of time for him to rise up that depth chart. For those hoping on an early impact from Burton, maybe you want to temper those expectations a little bit.
I've been taking a lot of Burton. I think he's going around RB74 or so in best ball drafts. Don't quote me on that, but he's in the 70s. I've been taking him. I know Yoshi has been going after him in best ball, and he was the guy running out there with the starters. He was getting some play with Burrow, so definitely something interesting to monitor. Probably a lot more so as a sleeper, somebody you're interested in seeing if they break out in the second half, as well as, of course, future years. But in best ball, if you're playing best ball, you're nasty like us, definitely keep an eye on that. Christian Kirk for the Jacksonville Jaguars did not play in 2 wide receiver sets. This isn't exactly new to Kirk, who has been a slot wide receiver most of his career and has shown the ability to produce with his limited snaps. There was hope that we would see him getting more snaps, see him potentially in on 2 wide receiver sets. If Kirk doesn't see a lot of those, he's going to have to be very efficient to live up to his current ADP of wide receiver 30. I'm a big Kirk stan. Most of the time, right, we are going to see a lot of 3 wide receivers out there. I think he is a safety blanket. I think we're going to see Ingram and Kirk, Davis and Thomas on the outside, and ETN in the backfield. I think we're going to see enough of that it's not going to be an issue. But I would really, really have loved to see him playing outside a little bit too. Not going to lie, David. Would make me feel a lot better about my exposure.
Yeah, we'll see how things go as the season develops. They got a couple new receivers they're trying to work in and find their roles. So maybe he finds his way into some two wide receiver sets. Definitely a little concerning. Caps his upside if he doesn't get out there, but definitely reliable. Like we said, he's done it before with a slot only role, so we know he can produce in that role. We were just hoping for maybe a little bit more. Titans news: Tony Pollard started, but Tyjae Spears came in for the second. They seem to rotate pretty regularly regardless of the game situation, so it wasn't like a short yardage guy and a passing down guy or something. They were both taking snaps in every situation. Kind of feels like it's just going to be a split backfield there, similar to Cincinnati. Both of these guys will have flex slash RB2 upside in a given week. And then obviously if one of them gets hurt, the other one has pretty big upside. So still a backfield I'm interested in, but definitely difficult to predict going forward.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I kind of lean Spears just because I think he has a little bit more explosiveness. But with the ACL concerns from him coming into the draft, I mean, who really knows? I think that the best approach is probably trying to have a little bit of exposure to both if you can, if you're playing in enough leagues too. But just understanding that without an injury, neither of them is likely to be a high end RB2, more the flex RB, low end RB2 plays, like you said. Moving along to a wide receiver room where we're not quite sure what's going to happen, but we love the QB. The LA Chargers, DJ Chark played all 6 snaps with the starters. Makes me feel a little bit better about paying a fourth for him in a best ball league this offseason. The other thing we noticed is Quentin Johnson did not get onto the field until DJ Chark retired for the day. We have heard the team say they expect Johnson to be an impactful player, but if he can't beat out DJ Chark, I can tell you he's not going to be relevant for fantasy. I think we all probably believe he's not going to be relevant for fantasy anyways, but just interesting to monitor. I personally would rather have DJ Chark than Quentin Johnson on my team, but prove me wrong, Quentin Johnson. I hope for you as the human.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to disagree with you on that take, even though it might sound a little like a hot take. I don't know if it even does at this point, though. The narrative around Quentin Johnson is just not good.
I wouldn't have paid that fourth in best ball for QJ, so
I think I might consider it if I had a couple fourths laying around.
I don't have any picks in that league.
Yeah, fair enough. Not a great situation for him. And like we said, if you can't beat out DJ Chark, you can't, expect to be a starter on a fantasy squad, even in the deepest of leagues. Keep an eye on that situation. Still trying to sell Quentin if you can anywhere. Taysom Hill kind of looks like Brock Bowers. He's obviously nowhere near the athlete, but they also lined him up out wide in the slot at tight end in the backfield. He's going to move around. He's still going to be a boom bust tight end, but probably the cheapest player in general that can actually win you a week. It might only be 1 week in the entire season, so you better hope you have him out there if it is. But he's done it before.
Yeah, we've talked all offseason that if you want to have him as your tight end, either you can have him as your tight end too and just know you're going to plug him in there if your Mark Andrews goes down with an injury, for example, and you don't have Likely. He is the type of guy that if you have him and you have a bunch of other tight ends, we've talked about this, if you have him and you have Mike Gesicki and you have Gerald Everett and you have like those types of guys, just start Taysom Hill every week, probably. Because the other guys can also give you a 0. If you have Taysom Hill and you have a trash tight end room, don't try to pick the lineups. Just put him in there. But ideally, we would rather have somebody a little bit more certain. But you could do a lot worse. Not many players have the ability to score 25 points like he can. That passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown upside.
That is very true. We are recording this on Sunday. I don't think there's a ton of games today, but anything that is happening today will not be mentioned in our show, so just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, absolutely good point. If we miss anything, let us know in the comments below. Moving on to some other news. So depth charts are starting to get released. It is smart to monitor these things, but none of these are going to line up exactly with week 1 depth chart, so don't overreact in either directions. Things like Moss over Brown are unsurprising, even if the hype we've heard from Brown, because teams usually give the nod to the vet in a camp battle. They make the younger guy earn it. You can't read too much into the first things. Reading into things like snap shares, like we mentioned, we didn't see those because Moss was sick. But looking at that type of stuff is going to give us a lot more news. Also, looking at the historical tendencies of coaches or teams. What David brought up about seeing Jalen Wright as the fifth running back on the depth chart, but we saw the same thing with Achane last year. If you can notice those types of patterns, and we will try to point those out to you when we see them, of course, let us know if you notice any patterns we didn't see. But noticing those patterns and trying to act on them can be a really great way to take advantage of other people overreacting to training camp news, which again, please do not overreact yourself. If you already had a take, you can use it as confirmation bias if you already felt very confident on it, but don't overreact to just this news in a vacuum, right? Unless it is in conjunction with things we already believed.
Yeah, definitely fun to see the news trickle out about depth charts and things. But like you said, just don't overreact. Long way to go before the season starts. Some of these guys are in the position they're going to be in, but a lot of these things are going to change. So something to monitor, but nothing major. Next bit of news actually is probably the biggest storyline right now in the NFL. Brandon Ayuk watch.
Do do do
Maybe he's traded
do
by the
do do.
time he releases. Maybe he's not. I still personally believe he's going to sign an extension. But, last week we heard he was a Steeler, and then we heard he was a Brown, and then maybe a Patriot. But no, he's a Steeler. Well, he's still a 49er, and they're negotiating again. So,
David, I saw on X from the Fantasy Gazette, I got a breaking news. Wide receiver Brandon Ayuk has been traded for wide receiver Jaden Reed in a 25-second in one of my fantasy football leagues this afternoon. I was well played, sir. Well played.
let's see, there's been some good content around Brandon Ayuk watch for sure. Definitely some good laughs out there. But realistically, like I said, I still think he's going to sign an extension. Wherever he goes, he's probably going to maintain most of his value. So a fun thing to watch. But if you're an Ayuk manager, just sit through the storm and figure it out after this all settles.
Unless you find somebody who's willing to pay what you would want, given the best case scenario, I would absolutely say hold as well. It is the news, it's the trade, it's the contract extension, it's whatever that always pumps the price up. So unless you're getting that price built in, holding absolutely the right thing to do. Little bit less fun to talk about, an update on Jordan Addison's DUI arrest this summer. So we aren't lawyers. When we talk about this kind of thing, we typically read what Drew Davenport says on X, trust his knowledge, give him a follow for better info there. From a recent post Drew made, Addison's first court date for his DUI arrest this summer is set for October 7th. He doesn't expect this case to reach conclusion in time for a suspension to happen this season, and when/if it does come, he does not believe it will be more than 3 games with the information currently available. Take that for what it is. Of course, it's always possible things change, but I will say Drew Davenport, smart guy. So probably a lot better off listening to him than you are to us and our opinions on it. So that's why we present his information.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know. Like, to me, when I hear the first court date's October 7th, I think, oh, maybe it's going to happen this season. Well, Drew Davenport is experienced in this kind of thing, and he doesn't. So I'm going to trust him. Probably other great people out there that report on this that also have experience, but he's just the one that seems to have the loudest voice in the fantasy community. Definitely a great follow if you haven't followed him already.
And if you guys have someone else you like getting your information from, let us know in the comments below, because we like to diversify as much as possible our resources as well. So would appreciate that from any of you.
Absolutely. And final little bit of random news here. Not that important these days, but just a big name. Patriots have released Juju Smith-Schuster. He was once an elite dynasty asset. I think probably an early first-round pick in some startups in 2018-ish, the year after his big season. He just never did anything. This might be the end of the career. It's certainly the end of anything near fantasy relevance, which he still hasn't had for a little while. If you have fond memories of him, now's the time to reminisce. If you have negative memories of him, then go ahead and say goodbye.
You can have that cathartic roster cut. You have our blessing. If I had any shares, which I don't, I would do it in a heartbeat. So do it yourself as well. Moving along to injury news that did not happen in the game. So Puka Nacua, hope he's not out for long. Looks like it's just an injury scare. It's a bursa sack. I have no idea what that is or how painful it is. I know Puka seems to be a crazy man. I mean that like in the best way possible, like would play through anything. They said he should be good to go for the season. It is worth checking in with the Puka manager to see if there's an injury discount, especially if you couple that with the cup hype train. I'm not selling at a discount personally. I would buy personally, if I could get it with any type of a discount or even just at a reasonable price, I'd consider paying a couple firsts for him. No problem. I'd want to try to make sure neither of them are early, but I could consider an early first and a mid-late first as well, just depending on it. Start 9 especially. Go ahead and pry. See what you can do. See what you can get, especially in shallow leagues where those hammers are so much more important. I'm not reading into this. Again, I'm not concerned, but maybe that's just because my exposure to him, it's a little bit higher. It has it so that I can't admit it could possibly be an issue, but I am never too worried about a young stud when we have a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver as the only other real relevant receiving option on the team.
Yeah, I think the important takeaway there is that there might be a small buy window, so it's worth checking in on. It's probably just nothing, but you got the cup hype and the injury coupled together. Maybe you can get a little discount. Another big name with a little injury. CMC has a strained calf. Doesn't sound major. Seems like they think he'll start the season. If it is a real calf injury, though, they can linger a little bit. So something to monitor, not something you're hoping for if you have him on a squad already. If you're going into a redraft league, though, I mean, he's still in consideration for 101 for me. I'm not saying he's a slam dunk there right now, but he kind of wasn't before this anyways. So not a whole lot changes in my opinion.
Yeah, for me, I think the most actionable thing off of this is see if you can get like a little bit more than you think you should. See if you can get a second for Elijah Mitchell or a 2/3 for Jordan Mason to the CMC owner. See if you can sell on this news that back up to them, especially if you can get a second for Elijah Mitchell and get another backup running back back. Or similarly, a third and a fourth and a backup running back for Jordan Mason. See if they're panicking. They probably are. People have a lot of negative memories with CMC injury, so I'd be trying to sell the handcuff to the owner right now at a CMC's injured in season type of premium. So that's the only actionable advice I have off that right now. Next injury, near and dear to my heart as a Lions fan. We see Sam Laporta has a hamstring injury. We do preach hamstring injuries are something to keep an eye on because of that re-injury risk. It's keeping him out of practice. It sounds like it's nothing to worry about. Again, this is Dynasty. We play Dynasty. I might not be considering him as highly as tight end 1, 2-ish range in redraft. I might be a little bit more concerned as my draft comes along at the end of the month in my home leagues. But he's still easily somebody that I value exactly the same in Dynasty. So nothing really for us to worry about in Dynasty at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there on both Dynasty and redraft take. I always thought he was kind of expensive as tight end 1 in redraft anyways. It's just because of how deep tight end is this year. I don't need to be the first guy to take one like in years past where Kelsey was definitely going to be the tight end 1.
Especially we can just take Ingram in like the 7th or 8th round. I mean, it's just whatever. Yeah.
Man,
I love
he's
Ingram.
basically Sam Laporta.
Yeah, I mean, minus probably the tight end 1 overall upside, but certainly I still think a good value. But I guess we're not on Evan Ingram trade. I just like to always try to take it there. You know me.
Yeah, just gotta hijack the podcast and take it whatever direction you please.
That's why I'm here.
Next bit of injury news we want to cover is Josh Downs. He's been having a great camp. Unfortunately, he suffered a high ankle sprain. Those are typically about 4 to 6 weeks to recover from. So that is the expectation here. That would mean he might miss the first couple games of the season. So keep an eye out for that and make sure you have a replacement ready to go to start the season if you were counting on him.
Yeah, hopefully a guy that you are only really counting on in a start 11 or deeper. I don't know how much pass volume there is to go around there, but I definitely like it for Pity City out of the gate. I think Michael Pittman is going to have a hot start to the season if Josh Downs is not able to play the first few weeks. So something to keep an eye on. Next piece of news, Rondale Moore suffered a season-ending injury. Hate to see it. We wish him well in his recovery. Hopefully he can get his career back on track. But if you still had Rondale Moore on your fantasy rosters, again, this is another drop. I personally had no shares, not even in a best ball league. I would have rostered him in best ball, just didn't have him. But this is pretty much the end of his career in fantasy, I would say. I wouldn't expect him to really have any other big chances after this. Any different opinion on that, David?
Nah, pretty much the same thing. And I did have him in best ball, and I cut him for, I want to say, Anthony Gold, who might see some snaps in the place of the injured Josh Downs we were just talking about. Might not even make the team though. I mean, I guess he probably will. I think he was, let's say, a fourth round pick maybe, so he'll probably make the team. But very little value. So definitely Rondell Moore is cut for anything. Unfortunately, he's just not going to be fantasy relevant the rest of his career. He has put on some incredible highlights for us throughout his career though. So wish him well in his recovery. Yeah, pour one out for the homie. He and Juju sharing a beer somewhere probably. Well, they can each afford their own beer, let's be honest. Next bit of news, actually on the good side, someone coming back from injury. Mike Williams activated off the pup, and it looks like he'll be ready for week 1. This is honestly something I didn't expect. And I mentioned him as being a little overvalued in, I don't remember if it was ESPN or Sleeper, but last week. And a part of that was because I didn't think he was going to have any time in the preseason. So still not very high on him, still not looking to buy, but maybe more willing to take a late round flyer on him in some redraft leagues than I was a week ago.
Yeah, I only have one share in Dynasty, but it does excite me because I've been taking quite a bit of him. I think I have 3 or 4 shares in Best Ball, and that's a place I was already more interested in him. And his Best Ball ADP is actually lower than his redraft ADP, why you had him as an overpriced player there. So for me, it's a little bit more interesting in Best Ball Dynasty leagues. But yeah, you're right. You never know. If Rodgers comes back to form, Mike Williams does anything like coming back to form, why not take a flyer in him in round 17 of your redraft leagues if he's still there, or etc. But chances are with his name cachet, he might be going higher still than we feel comfortable with, especially with positive news. Last but not least, Unlimited is back to practice. Russell Wilson is back. I think it's going to be interesting to see, does he run with the ones pretty much exclusively once Fields is back? Like, what are they doing? What are they saying? Doesn't matter so much because I think we all know that they're kind of managing the ego of Russell Wilson a little bit there. We're not going to know Justin Fields is taking over until he does, if he does. So I think it's just more like who's playing with the ones, what happens, etc. Snap counts in games if they do play Wilson with all the ones, Fields without. That's what I'm looking at. So now that they're both on the field, actions are going to speak a lot louder than words, I think.
That's the big thing here we're excited to see is Wilson the exclusive QB1? Is it, split shares with the ones between him and Fields? Has Fields taken over the job? I still think it's going to be Wilson there. It kind of seems like the Steelers thing to do. With Fields' upside, if he is going to be a starter, that's something we care a lot about. So something to watch for sure. Glad Wilson's back at practice. Yeah, that's about it.
Unlimited. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dino Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you view. And from all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast, until next time.